This is the Seers Seed podcast, where we explore the seer gift within the kingdom of God mindset.
Hello. I'm just.
I saw that coming.
Like we are, and suddenly we are in the episode. Say that. What did you say about the Lord of the Spirits podcast?
So one of the fathers, the pod fathers on Lord of the Spirits has done a spinoff called The Great Tales, and he's got a different co-host, and I can't, is it DeYoung? I think. Anyway, The Great Tales, and they are going over how the church fathers used ancient mythology, Greek mythology, and these great pieces of literature to teach spiritual truths.
Mhm.
And I love that because we're watching people pick these stories up, and that becomes a lens through which we can understand, not saying the Bible's a myth, but the mythological content within the Bible. And that's what we kind of think of a lot of the spiritual content, where we're talking about the supernatural realm and spirits and the elementals. I mean, all of this stuff goes right back. We were talking Tolkien before we got on that topic.
Well,
And
I'll just announce it here. I plan on doing in between our own episodes. I plan on doing a talk through, a read through discussion of the Lord of the Rings, because I keep referring to it and how it helped me put on a supernatural lens.
Mhm.
And there's more to it than that. But I want to talk through here on the Seers podcast as we read through, and so stay tuned. That's coming. But
well, and I think a lot of these stories, they honestly, the stories, not just mythology and not just great fantasy fiction, but movies and TV, they've been written by seers. People don't
Yeah.
realize that. They have been written by seers who are trying to communicate the reality they live in a way that people can accept. And if I put it in a fictionalized work and a fictionalized world, now you can go, okay, trees can talk. Okay, there can be spirits moving through walls. There can be supernatural insight. But the minute you try to bring it into this world, then that's where people go, oh, well, you're just crazy.
Yeah, I want to title this episode "The Grimm Truth About Nature Spirits."
I love it.
So when I mentioned that we're doing this episode or this topic a few weeks ago, you sent me some links, some YouTube clips of the TV show Grimm,
Mm-hmm.
which I have never watched. And why don't you just give a high view of
Yeah.
Grimm? So this is Grimm in the context of the Grimm's fairy tales.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a TV show. It came out 2014, I believe. And the basic premise is that there is a bloodline flowing through the family Grimm, the brothers Grimm of the great fairy tales, who have this ability to see these creatures. Now, these creatures aren't necessarily presented as spiritual beings. They're just creatures that compose as humans, but occasionally their true nature can shine through. And if you are part of this Grimm bloodline, then you can see them whether they want to be seen or not. And when I first watched it, you and I weren't like really communicating. Doug and I weren't. So
Right.
I didn't have like the seer vocabulary. And just recently, it's like, go back and watch that again. And I'm like, oh, now they're showing how the Grimm is seeing the stuff. He's a seer. They don't call him that, but that's exactly what he is.
Right.
And so,
yeah, so the TV show Grimm, Grimm, is on NBC from 2011 to 2017, and I don't know if it's on. I want to say it's on Netflix or some streaming service, but
Amazon has it.
Amazon. Well, good, because a bunch of people are dropping Netflix, but
I did.
yeah. But anyway. So I have not watched it, but I did a little research after watching those clips you sent, and you sent one where he's watching a video of Hitler, and in the end of it, he sees like this. I don't want to say spiritual nature, but the true self manifest on the
Right.
video. And every now and
This
then
little flash.
you'll see, you'll hear like people even now will show a picture of a president or some world leader and say, "Oh, do you see the shadow behind him?" And I'm like, "I don't see anything
Yeah.
behind him," But
Right.
but I
I don't
just
always see on those what people are referring to, and sometimes I do, and it's always a little disconcerting to think that can be caught on camera. Um,
yeah, I've had a lot of seers send me pictures over the years of, and do you see the fire in the woods? Like the spiritual fire in
mhm.
the wood. I'm like, no, I don't. Like it's right there. How can you not see that? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how it can be captured on camera.
Well, and so in one of the episodes, what was really funny was I think they were watching the Hitler film again in a different context in the show,
Mm.
and he's like, "There it is. Did you see it?" And all the other people who couldn't see were like, "No."
Hmm.
But the thing was, one of the interesting points in the show is it's only when things get really out of hand and these creatures that they call Vesen are forced into a corner that everybody else can see them. And I'm like, that's the way it is really in the spiritual realm, because I personally believe a lot of what they're depicting, this is where it's going to get controversial. Um, they're depicting not just somebody who sees spirits, but they're seeing someone who befriends spirits. They're supposed to be your buddy, that you're supposed to take them in and enjoy them. And in the show, honestly, I want Monroe to be my friend. I want that character to be my friend, a blue bot. I mean, how cool would that be? But at the same time, I think it's grooming. I think it's grooming us to accept that when you see a spiritual being, you're supposed to reach out. We already have this idea. If there's ghosts in your house, it's because they have unfinished business and you need to stop and help them so that they can pass on to the next realm. No, you don't. And
Mm.
so,
That reminds me. Did we watch Poltergeist together a bunch of years ago on the
no, we
commentarians?
didn't. Okay, so it's funny that you brought this up because uh, my, I was talking to somebody just this past week, one of our viewers. Uh, I literally did not watch horror movies growing up. And Poltergeist was the first movie I saw, a horror movie I saw, because I'd gone to a cousin's house and my parents weren't there to say no. Ruined clowns for me forever.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I was 8. So yeah, so it's interesting you bring that movie up. And I've never seen it again.
Wow, I've watched it a few times. There was my daughter. So Annalise, of course, is the grew up as the seer in the
Mhm.
family, but then it sort of faded a little bit, and then she went through her little rebellious teenage phase, where she's like, "I'm watching horror movies now," and I'm like, "Cause I didn't watch horror movies. I've talked about that before, or zombie movies. I did, and then realized it wasn't healthy for me, so I didn't really have that in the house." Well, one night she had some friends over several years ago when she was in high school. She had some friends over, and they watched some terrifying movie. I don't remember the name of the movie, but in the movie, a figure, a spiritual creature, or a demented murderer says something. Okay, right before he kills, or something destructive happens. All right, and they're terrified. So in the morning, they came downstairs, into the kitchen, and they're just like, whatever, cheerful. They were up all night. They're
Mhm.
tired. We came down for some breakfast, and on the whiteboard in our kitchen, my son, who is a few years younger, 7 years younger, had written that exact phrase on the whiteboard. And the girls were like, "Why did he write that?" And he said, "I don't know. I just came down and wrote it." And I said, "No more horror movies." He said, "I don't know." He was so cute. He was so sweet. "I don't know." I'm like, and they're like, "Oh," I said, and they're all like, "I told you we shouldn't watch this movie," and I don't have an explanation for it. I mean, within our worldview, we can kind of understand. I'm not going to lean too much into it, but it was it's super creepy.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
like he just came down. He was 7, so they were like 16 or 15 or whatever. Then he's like 7 or 8 or whatever, and he just came down. He just wrote that on the whiteboard. No, didn't know why.
No, that's insane. Well, I mean, but it happens. I
Yeah,
mean, I think we do need to be very careful what we bring into our space. So after years of not watching horror movies, I have to tell my little story that my friend, the earlier conversation made me think of. I was doing a death and dying class, and I was 27, 28, and we had to watch a movie about death and dying, and everybody was picking like Brian's Song and Sophie's Choice, and and I'm like, I am not watching some kind of sobby, I'm just, it's not me.
Hmm.
And I thought, I'm going to watch a horror movie because that's all they're about, is about death and dying. And so I asked Nathan, I said, hey, which one should I watch? And he suggested I watch The Ring. And so I'm at home alone. I'm watching The Ring. And this is not an endorsement, but I'm also the kind of person, I was watching all the extras. And one of the extras on the copy I had the uncut video they show on that's supposed to bring the girl into your home. And right as she's starting to crawl towards the TV screen and on the movie, that's where she comes out and kills you. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I reached over, I grabbed the remote, I'm hitting the off button frantically. Nothing is working, just like on the movie. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I finally get it. I just go up and I turn it off. And then the phone rings, just like in the movie. And so I had the remote for the stereo system. And it was Nathan calling to see if I had enjoyed the movie. So anyway, that was, you would have thought that broke me, but that actually began like a whole season where I began toying with what's going on. What is the draw to horror movie? I realized, and a friend reminded me, this whole thing is coming together. This episode is crazy to me because a friend reminded me this morning, totally separate conversation from anything I've talked about with anybody else this week. And she said, do you remember when you told me that horror movies, people watch them because they don't get to experience the fear of God? We've made God so fluffy and so nice that people don't know what it's like to fear, and that there's an element of healthy fear and awe of God that if we don't have it, we're going to seek out a counterfeit. And I'm like, I had no idea. I'd forgotten I'd even said that. But it brought back a lot of those memories because how many people are searching for a thrill?
Right.
And if it's just in a movie or something to make them feel alive, because there's something when you're in the presence of God, there's this awe, there's this overwhelming fear, but there's also peace. It's all tied up in this one big package. And as close as we can get to humanly manufacturing it is fear. We can't get the awe and the peace, but we can at least get that one emotion. And I think there's something about us that we'll seek it out if we're not experiencing it on a somewhat regular basis.
Especially the
So,
supernatural horror, where
mhm.
when I was a teenager, supernatural horror kind of bored me because it seemed so obvious how to defeat it.
Yes.
Like you in the name of Jesus, or pray in tongues, whatever. I mean, I like it seems so obvious. So they did kind of bore me. It's the slasher flicks. I didn't care. I've never cared for them. I didn't care to see the blood splattering and just the psychotic.
Yeah.
But I something. So I want to go back to what you said. You said something about grooming. How Grimm and I
Yeah.
think back, sort of in our younger years, Bewitched.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not Bewitched. Charmed.
Okay.
Charmed.
Yep.
Bewitched, kind of. Like that's more of a
I,
fun thing. But Charmed were about these three. I never watched it, but it
mhm.
was about three young witches. And they
Yeah.
just sort of, and then Wizard of Waverly Place. No, I like that show. It really had a Christian worldview from a perspective that they honored the father, like they honored the dad. A lot of
Mm.
TV shows don't honor the dad,
Yeah. No.
and but still you're dealing with, and he's like teaching them in the ways of how they should be. But still, it's called Wizards of Waverly. Like,
Right.
um,
Yeah. Well, and that's because I didn't see a lot of those. I watched, for me, it was Supernatural,
yes,
was
you
the big
you
one.
you encouraged me to watch that years ago. I never did, but
Well,
it's
if I
also available now.
encourage, but
You
it's
suggested it. Yeah.
it's because yeah, but I was kind of like you with it because when I first started watching, I'm like, it's a theological train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, come on, guys, just pray. You could wrap this up. But yeah, and Carnival with HBO, which was really rough. So if you got sensitive
Carnival
ears,
Row. Carnival Row.
no, I I've watched a little bit, but it wasn't memorable enough for me to
Okay.
even pay attention to. But yeah, Carnival was oh, but it was filmed in Oklahoma, so that kind of was another
So
point that
shows like Supernatural and Lucifer sort of
Lucifer.
deconstruct biblical supernaturalism,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Where these biblical figures like Satan or angels or demons or even God are recast
Mm.
as cosmic, as flawed cosmic players, which is very
Yeah.
monist, right? Yahweh, very Gnostic. Yahweh is a flawed,
hmm
rebellious figure. Like
He becomes
Gnosticism,
annoying.
yeah, Gnosticism actually inverts the creation narrative in
hmm
Genesis 1, 2, and 3, but where Yahweh is actually the rebel, and the enlightened, Satan's the enlightened one who's trying to enlighten humans. But that's what that whole deconstruction. I never watched this. Excuse me, never watched Lucifer or Supernatural. Um,
I watched the first few seasons of Lucifer because everybody was saying, "Oh, it's so fantastic," and I'm like, I'm still not getting it. I'm still not.
a lot of these I think are pretty well written from what I've understood, but you know, eh, it's just it's like if you make demons rebels that are relatable, and
hmm
that humanity's destiny is not reconciling with the creator, but you're on your own. Like you can create your own destiny, and
Yeah.
so these are obviously. And what's interesting, I was talking with Amy about this last night. How some of these shows, what were we talking about? It was some show that I said I just couldn't watch it because I was aware of the worldview it was portraying, and it just rocked my heart. And she
hmm
said, you think way too much about that. And like I didn't care. It didn't do anything with me. I watched it and forgot about it. I'm like, I get it. That's fine.
hmm
Nothing wrong with that. But I mean, I think we do need to be aware, because what happens when you said this earlier, when we engage these old stories, you didn't say it in these words. We engage these old stories. You do sort of rest your mind,
hmm
and then
hmm
we call it programming, TV programming. The programming camp comes in, and so
hmm
we engage these stories differently than you'd engage like history or
Yeah.
documentary or theology, when all of it's theology.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that's where we have to be able to look at something objectively and go, okay, so here's what they're presenting. Here's how it lines up with truth. Here's how it lines up with God's word. If you're not studying God's word, you can't do that. And I think that's a lot of times why, especially young Christians and newly converted Christians, God like says, done. You cannot even play in this pool. And then there's times that God says, hey, you can go back and play and see what's going on, just to be aware of what's going on out there. Because
Right.
I I've got friends who they go, oh, you watch Supernatural. I couldn't do that. Okay, if it convicts your spirit, if there is some kind of
Mhm.
check in your spirit, don't do it. I mean, just it's not a good idea. Um, I'd forgotten about this until again talking with a friend this week. We were talking about what we were allowed to watch, and you may remember these movies, the Christopher Walken prophecy movies.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, a long time ago.
yeah.
And
So
excuse me.
literally on VHS tape, guys. That's how I watched it. Okay, so that long ago, and I was in an angry mood when I went to go pick up my videos that day. This is when me and God were having a little bit of a standoff, and he was letting me throw a fit essentially, and waiting for me to get over it. And I go and I put the VHS tape in the VHS player. It spits it out, and I'm like, put it back in. It spits it out, and I'm like, I'm going to watch this movie, and I shove it in, and it goes in, and my doors, which opened opposite directions at the same moment that it started to play, flew open. And I'm like, oh, oh, maybe I just opened more than, this a physical door here. So, and yes, I did watch it. And we had to deal with the fallout from that. So,
Mhm.
but again, we're going back to how powerful is God in relationship to Satan? Should
Right,
we mourn Satan's fate? Should we feel sorry for him and pray
right.
for his deliverance? On Supernatural, one of the more interesting characters is a guy named Crowley, who's king of hell. Um, he actually winds up being my favorite character. He's a well-written character, and
Mhm.
um, but
How
you know,
subversive is that, right?
yeah.
The most interesting characters are,
hmm
The most well-written, challenging characters. How about Buffy? Did you watch Buffy?
I never got into Buffy. I think because it was too girly for me.
Okay. Yeah, I love Buffy. I love Buffy. I love Buffy seasons 1 through 3, and after that, witchcraft became a much stronger. They use witchcraft as a metaphor for personal freedom and the feminine power and so on. And it got a little too pagan with me. My family, we're actually watching it with our kids because there's so many.
hmm
We really enjoy it. But I find as we get past season 4, I'm less
hmm
interested in, like, as a family engaging that. But we do engage it and we talk about it because honestly, Buffy, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then it's the show Angel, it's spinoff show Angel, which is
hmm
even darker. I mean, Angel really engages as the series goes on. It starts off as a metaphor for just getting through high school, but as the series goes on, they deal in divine council worldview. I mean, they call them the
hmm
PTBs, the powers that be, the PTBs. So the powers that
Okay.
be, they sent this person here to help fight the forces of
hmm
evil. Hey, we really need you on our side because we're fighting. And there's very much dualism there,
hmm
and it's definitely not Christian worldview, but it's anyway. But the writing was so good
hmm
that it was so interesting, and it did break ground, and with embracing like women, strong female characters,
hmm
not like the strong female characters we have in a lot of shows today, which are just terribly written. But like Buffy,
Yeah.
and some of these characters are really pretty well written, and also like embracing, like, there's lesbian relationships, there's gay, like it broke ground, which the culture
hmm
loves, right? It pushed the envelope in some of these areas, and that's when it started doing that. I lost interest, but we'll probably keep watching it. It gets, and they're going to re-release Buffy. I mean, like Sarah Michelle Gellar is coming back with, I don't know if it's a reboot or if it's a sequel. I liked some of it in the sense that you do have an older person, a male, who's trying to train these young people on how to fight the forces of evil. I mean, I like
hmm
that, but
Right.
it's,
What?
again, it's training
Where's
people how not to
where
think
is that from?
biblically.
Well, yeah, but where is that in a biblical church worldview? Because when we're told that being a good Christian is being nice, okay,
Right.
nice is not a fruit of the spirit. I heard that somewhere this past month, and I'm like, absolutely, amen. Being nice is not a fruit of the spirit. And so we're supposed to be clean cut, and we're not supposed to get tattoos. We're not supposed to cuss, smoke, or chew, or hang with the girls who do. I mean, we've got all of these rules. There, and I think this is where, like, even a lot of the whole wild at heart kind of stuff started coming in, where men needed to be men, and we see people complaining about the feminization of church out of balance to what's going on, what I've seen at least. So we aren't teaching men and women how to have adventures with God,
Mm-hmm.
how to fight evil, how to acknowledge. I mean, I was raised in a church where demons didn't exist. Supposedly, they stopped operating when the last apostle died. And to know that I've actually been called to take a stand and to stand against and resist these powers of evil and darkness. How can I know what to do that when I don't even think they're real? And
That comes
so,
back. That goes back to Grimm,
mhm,
right? Where Grimm sort of says, no, these things exist. There are some people who can see them, and
mhm,
in that area, in that show, I think magic is neutral. It's not.
right,
How I would view magic, how I would say magic is like Christians have spiritual gifts. We have the Holy Spirit gives
mhm,
us ability sometimes to do things that are supernatural. Other spirits, other spiritual powers, they also have gifts, and
mhm,
they also empower people. And sometimes I think if you try to manipulate the spirit to give you the power, that's where the magic. That's what
yeah,
magic is. But in these
absolutely,
shows, I don't know that these rules are well defined. Certainly in Buffy,
right,
they weren't well defined. So like anything, in a lot of these shows, the poorly written ones, magic is a, like, what's that called? Mock Deuce. The god rescues. What's that called
oh,
in the
the
show?
Deus Ex Machina,
Yeah, Deus Ex Machina. Yeah,
mhm,
yeah. Where a they just need a spell and it fixes it. In Star Trek, it
yeah,
was like the technology. Just we need technology and it fixes the thing.
right,
That's poorly written shows, but anyway, I think these shows too, they have a lot of spiritual hierarchy, but they are
Hmm.
not biblical. Like Yahweh's not in the picture,
Right.
Jesus is not in the picture,
They either
except
ignore God or God has to become something that they're fighting against because he is the ultimate power who could come in and fix everything.
mhm. And the challenge is,
And
why doesn't he fix it? It's like, well, there now we go to image bearing, and now you go into the problem of
mhm,
evil and biblical worldview,
yeah,
which we
yeah.
talk about, but they don't want to engage that, and so
I know when I was watching Supernatural, they had a prophet show up. I don't know, like, are we doing spoilers? Anyway, but
yes,
this
we can do spoilers. It's fine. These shows
okay,
are old, right? So
right, right, yeah. Well, and this prophet, his name's Chuck, and Chuck is writing books, what he thinks are fictional books, and it's actually the story of the two brothers that the show is about. And so, as he writes them, that becomes the reality. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this. I'm like, there you go. This is now he was doing it in a fatalistic way. Once it was written down, that's how it had to be. But whenever you look at what the prophets in the Old Testament were, they're writers. And the traditional Jewish view of that was once a prophet spoke, a prophet created the possibility for that new reality.
oh, I
It
kind of like it.
wasn't yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, these are like adjacent to
Mhm.
truth.
Yes, well, and there is a real strong Jewish, influence on Supernatural, Cyrus Yavne, which, Cyrus, we can go back into he was prophesied about in Isaiah. I believe it's Isaiah. Yavne is the city where the Talmud was written.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, so there's like a really strong Jewish influence, but, and I don't want to get too far afield with this because it's actually Kabbalistic Judaism, which now we're getting into another form uh, of um, of witchcraft, quite frankly, and
Right,
different
right. So
kind of magic.
just a word of explanation. After Christianity started to
Hmm.
take over the Jewish faith, or the Judean faith, I should say, as more
Hmm.
and more Jews and then Gentiles became Christians, the sort of the core, the majority leadership of the Judean faith went into a different direction, where they
Hmm.
and then in the Middle Ages you got into some the Kabbalah,
Yeah,
which is sort of like monism and Gnosticism, and like and it really is
it's
kind
a
of witchcraft. And
mismatch. Yeah.
yeah, it's but that's what happened whenever you reject you reject the actual creator who took on flesh,
Hmm.
and then now you start worshiping, in a sense you equate God with the universe, or and then it led into all sorts of Gnosticism,
Well, yeah,
witchcraft.
and that's the really interesting thing to me is a lot of these shows actually go back and pick up these threads and they
So
repackage them.
influential.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes it. I don't. That's a path I don't want to go down. So let me reframe it. But like Eco Umberto, or Umberto Eco, and he
Uh-huh.
wrote Foucault's Pendulum, whatever. Anyway, that guy
Because,
knew like
yeah, because.
so many of these conspiracy theories today, and so like one of the shows, it goes back to Kabbalah, goes back to
Mhm.
these ideas, like even like the Masonic movement. A lot
Mhm.
of these things go back to it. There's a show out. Let me look at my notes here. There's a show out now. Like The Witcher. Do you ever watch The Witcher?
I did watch The Witcher. It was okay.
Yeah,
It
I didn't, but I've
there
heard that it's good. At least I heard a lot of these shows. First few seasons are good, and then you know,
they go off the rails
yeah.
because there's no place okay, so they can begin in like with Grimm, we begin with fairy tales, we begin with fables, we begin with these kind of folklore kind of stuff going on. At a certain point, in order to take the storyline deeper or to continue with it, now we have to start involving spirits. We have to, and if we're involving spirits, do we have demons? Do we have angels? Is God there? What does this look
And where
like?
do they come from, and what's the
Yes.
context, and like what are the rules of engagement, and then
Mhm.
and that's where you have two paths. You can go down monist, like Kabbalistic
Mhm.
path, or you can go down a Christian worldview. But Christian worldview until like recently isn't, unless you're an Eastern
Mhm.
Orthodox, or Catholic, like classic Catholic. It's
Right.
not well defined.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like talking about you not liking the slasher films and me watching Supernatural, and it's like the theological train wreck. Because now, if I can pray, I can talk to God, we can deal with this with God on our side. Now the battle's over.
Yeah, it's
At
too
least that's how
simple,
they
right?
see it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
way too simple. Way too. We talk about this in the Seer book, the history of like the ability to see, and like when the Enlightenment came about, like wholesale denominations just embraced the Enlightenment and desupernaturalized their worldview, which is ridiculous. We talked about that before. I have a note here. Again, I've not watched The Witcher, but they talk about living cosmos filled with sentient forces, power through bloodlines, rituals, and ancient languages. And that's fascinating because I think, a lot of this stuff does go on. And I just want to give a shout out to a book series by Sharon Gilbert called The Redwing Saga. The Redwing Saga. So it takes place in like 19th century Europe, and again, it goes back to like bloodline. The first book is called Blood Lies, and it's just like this ancient struggle between good and evil, and like, but it's Christian worldview. They're actually Christians
Okay.
fighting like demonic forces in ways that are very. Again, I've not read the whole series, but you want to talk about? You said earlier we need Christian books. We need Christian stories that tell how to engage this in interesting ways, and that is a
Yes.
series that does that. She's Sharon Gilbert, and they go, yeah.
So since you bring him up, my one of my favorite is Stephen Lawhead, The Song of Albion.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're dealing with these Christian worldviews because and I think part of the problem is because of the Enlightenment, we have presented Christianity as being so flat and boring that we think that the storylines do have to be simple. Because we know as Christians living our lives day to day, it's not simple. I mean, it's mundane sometimes. It's very blasé, but it's not always simple.
Well, we say
And
things like, you need to engage in spiritual disciplines. You need to read your Bible. You need to pray. You need to go to church. And like, well, I've heard that all my life. Is it more to that?
yeah,
Like, if you get away from those, like things spiral. Like that's the basis. That's the foundation.
I don't know anybody who has been involved in church consistently who has stepped away and left those things behind and been able to, they might still claim to be Christians and say, oh, well, I still believe, I still pray. Well, are you opening your Bible? No, because I know it. Okay, well, number one, you never know it. But they will get spun out in the craziest off the rails. And I know we're talking, okay, let's put this in context. We're talking about people seeing things and interacting things in the supernatural level on a regular basis. That's what our whole podcast is about. But these people, I look at them and go, you're nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they get caught up they'll get caught up in sin. They will start bringing in different religious ideologies, not just practices, because sometimes it's really hard to go, okay, well, this is a religious practice, this isn't. But they will bring in ideologies and start to adhere to those above biblical ideas because they know the Bible, but they've forgotten it. And so,
yes, and like you said, I was had a business meeting at church this week. And I told them, like, because in my church, we've been going through the book of Luke. I think I've said that a bunch of times. It's going to take us 2 years, I think, to preach through that book. I have learned so much. So much. How many times have I read these stories? How many times have I read some of the Old Testament references? And it's just the scriptures have just come alive in new ways. Well, and it's not just me. And I said in my sermon last week that something hit me huge in the passage we're in. And I told them, my people, that might not hit you at all. Something else I might say may hit you in the message. Something else in the story, because the Holy Spirit. Because we're all on a different journey. We're hopefully on a journey to Christ. So you have to continue to go to the Bible. The Bible is the only book that you can read with the author. I mean, not literally the only book, but I mean, the author is always with you. The inspired person, who's the Holy Spirit, he is with you if you allow him, and he can just highlight things.
when you begin to really pick the Bible apart and really to dig into it, and what's funny is, in order to do this, you have to know the Bible, have a general good overview, and then you have to get into the minutia, and it's like that tension again, because everything God does has that tension
Yeah.
on each side, and it's amazing what's there. I once, because of crazy circumstances, delivered on the spot a 3-hour, no joke, a 3-hour lecture on Genesis 1:1. And it was for a class I was teaching in a college, is an evening class. And I said, okay. I said, we could do that with every single verse in the Bible. We don't have time, but don't even begin to think that we've even gotten to the bottom of this one verse. This isn't even a sentence. It's a phrase. And that's the thing. People think just because they can repeat back the words that they can show you that they know the truth there. Well, the truth is so much bigger.
Well, because God is so much bigger. I mean, it's like a thread in a sweater. You know, you start picking on it. Next thing you know, and I did that last week when in my sermon, in my sermon prep, it just took me on this incredible journey, and I had to rewrite the sermon. I kind of want to get back to like other stories that engage maybe nature spirits or engage things. So I have that behind me on a Narnia map, and I've only read the Chronicles of Narnia maybe just a few times. I've not read them as much as I've read maybe Lord of the Rings, but I missed it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. But again, there are nature spirits in there, and I just completely did not understand it. And it wasn't really. I saw the last movie adaptation back in the early 2000s, 2005 or so, 2008. When I saw that movie adaptation, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a nature spirit. Like again, you have these people in Hollywood, and we've talked about this before. We have these artists, and some of them have seen this.
They
stuff.
had to,
and they're animating it, right?
Yeah. Well, and so and even if you go backwards in time and you look at these depictions across cultures that were separated at that point, there was no communication, where they will have similar spirits depicted in the same way. They'll have similar ideas. We were talking about the trees. How many cultures teach that if you pray beneath certain species, some it's the cottonwood, some it's the birch, some it's the live oak, because of the constant movement of the leaves on these particular trees, they will take your heavens more effectively to the God who's in the sky. This is a universal.
Take your prayers more effectively. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And so that's the beautiful thing when you start to see they're getting, this has got to have some kind of truth, or people would not be seeing it all over. There's seers in all of these cultures who had some kind of experience with these beings, or they wouldn't be depicting them the same way.
I want to talk about rivers and the difficulty of spirits crossing rivers. So there's this idea, and it goes way back. So it has to be rooted in something that a common shared experience of seers seeing this happen in the spirit realm, where certain kinds of spirits, mainly demons and ghosts, cannot cross bodies of water. Like bodies of water, they find difficult. So that's why you build bridges, because bridges, they in effect bind whatever the spirit of the water is. They sort of bind them and allow people to cross. And this is why when Jesus walked on water, and they say, "Oh, it's a ghost," that was reflecting the ignorance of the disciples, because everybody knew in that culture ghosts can't walk on water, gods can, deities can. And as because the power of the water god, if you will, the water spirit, maybe it's Leviathan, maybe it's, I don't know, there's something there in the Bible. It touches on it, it glances on it, because it assumes the understanding. It assumes the understanding. And when we desupernaturalize this, we miss some of the wonder of Scripture, and we miss understanding so much of storytelling. So like even in the Lord of the Rings, and they show this in the films, the beginning of when the ring wraiths, the ring spirits, a wraith is a spirit, and they are chasing the hobbits, and they jump on this ferry, and they go across the ferry, and the horses stop, and they're like, And then they ride off. And I remember the first time watching that, my daughter said, "Why don't the horses just jump in? The horses can swim." And I said, because spirits can't cross water. They have to go to the bridge. And
Yeah.
she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "I know. They don't explain it in the book. They don't explain it in the book or the movie. They just assume, like, and they don't, in the movie, I don't think they even assume you understand. That's what happens in the book. They ride down to the bridge and cross over the bridge and come back. But why
That's
do they
how
do
you,
that? Because
yeah,
in Tolkien's world, the spirits act like spirits have always acted. They have difficulty crossing bodies of water.
and that's how universally it was accepted and known, at least as part of quote unquote fiction or mythology,
Mm-hmm.
even in Tolkien's time, which was not that long ago,
Mm-hmm.
that this is expected that people would understand this. And we have just set so much of this aside and said it doesn't matter. You don't
Yeah.
need to know these things.
Yeah. So like, well, how does it matter? I'm like, I don't know. But it's just part of the reality. And there's something powerful about water and the ocean and seas and rivers. I mean, how often do you you're in the woods and you come across a river? Do you stop and look at it and go, huh?
Well, and so that's one of the things that's so beautiful about when the children of Israel are crossing the Red Sea. I mean, Heiser does a lot of work on this where he's talking about those chaos creatures that live in the sea. Why? Because you don't know what's under that water. You
Mm-hmm.
can't see what's lurking in the depths. I live in Oklahoma. People noodle here. They put their hands in holes underwater and pull out catfish the size of me. And this happens on a regular basis. So the things that live in the water are scary.
Yeah.
And this is the one kind of fishing I don't do. And that's Oklahoma. That's not the Mediterranean. And
Yeah.
so, but the thing is, Pharaoh, one of his jobs was to keep chaos at bay. He was supposed to make sure that it did not overwhelm the world again and destroy the empire that was Egypt. And that was, where was chaos? Well, it's embodied in the water. So what I think is so great there, where our God says, hey, this thing that you're so scared of, watch me control it. And oh, by
Yeah.
the way, this thing that you're so scared of, it's going to take you out. All this whole time that you were trying to lord over it, you didn't even have the authority.
Mm-hmm.
I do. It's amazing. It's like it's what I want to say is completely inappropriate for Christian conversations, but it's God basically saying, "Yeah, watch me."
Uh-huh.
It's fabulous, but you're not going to see that if you don't know the mythology.
And they do it again when they cross the Jordan.
Yes,
He
yes.
parts to Jordan, and they do it again. We never talk about that, but that's why.
Yeah.
I mean, that's leaving. That's leaving like the chaos wilderness and entering sacred. That's where the holy war begins. He splits the Jordan. They cross, which is why we get baptized. That's the baptism is metaphor for one of the reasons. Reasons.
And so then go forward to Elijah and Elisha.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever Elijah's taken up in the chariot, because he goes out into the wilderness, he crosses that, goes to the wilderness, gets taken up, and then Elisha comes back in. And
There's a reason Jesus gets on a boat and he casts off a little bit to preach. Now, when I was a kid, in a Pentecostal church, okay, so a church had already when I was a kid, in a Pentecostal church that engages the supernatural on some level, I was taught the reason he did that is because they didn't have microphones and sound systems, and sound carries better. Isn't he smart? That's not why. That is
a Baptist taught him that.
Yeah, that is not why Jesus went on the river to preach. Was
it the River of Galilee?
Or Sea of Galilee, yeah, the sea. It is all supernatural symbolism and prophetic. He's making declarations of who he is and where he's come from and what he's about to do. Yahweh invading the land and taking the land back. I mean, it's just why he went to the wilderness and why he crossed the sea, why he got baptized. I mean, it's all supernatural.
Like he literally went to the place where spirits ran wild. People don't realize that's what the wilderness was. That was the place where the spirits just did their thing without any kind of governance or control. And to go out there in the middle of that wilderness, and we can go back and talk about the journey out of Egypt if we wanted to with this, To go out there was to rely on God's supernatural protection as a God who was not confined by a physical boundary, who was
Mm-hmm.
not attached to a specific piece of land. And so now we have God showing his absolute rule and dominion over all creation in these acts. But again, we don't get that. We don't get the supernatural aspect of it. Why? Because we don't teach the mythology.
You know what we need to do? Because I don't remember all the details on the top of my head. So we need to come back. Um, and we're gonna talk about, we talked about this years ago. We never did. We're gonna do trees,
Okay.
like the cosmic tree, trees in the Bible, trees in the ancient world. Okay, we talked about that. And then we're also gonna do the Galilee, the Jordan River going into the Dead Sea, what all of that means. I want to say the M word, mythologically,
Right.
supernaturally, powerfully. Just because it's mythical doesn't mean it's not true in the Bible,
Right.
particularly.
Was it George MacDonald who wrote The Myth That Was True? Who wrote The Myth That Was
No,
True?
it was C.S. Lewis and Tolkien talked about it, but that was Myth That Was True is the first draft of Unseen Realm.
Okay.
Michael
Okay.
Heiser was going to
See,
call it The Myth That Is True, and later some people talked him out of it and said it's just, now it's Unseen Realm.
where did MacDonald? Okay, so MacDonald's another good person to read if you want to read a good
Highly
Christian
influential
perspective.
author.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And and they've all gotten like blended in my head because
Hmm.
that's how my brain works. This is not divided up one little bit for me. And maybe it's because when I do see a fairy tale portrayed on film, or I read that story or that beautifully drawn illustrated book, I'm like, yeah, this is what it looks like. And so
I want to
it,
contrast a pagan view of nature versus a biblical view in fiction. Okay, so
oh,
pagan
in
view,
fiction. Okay.
nature is divine, and
Hmm.
in C.S. Lewis, nature is sacred because it belongs to God. So it's not divine, but it is sacred. At least it will
Right.
become sacred space eventually. All of it. Spirits are to be appeased, and you see this a lot. You see it in Buffy. You see it in a lot of the. The spirits are to be
Hmm.
fearful, be appeased. There's actually a Buffy episode where Native Americans around Columbus Day, Native American spirits were rising up to attack. They were, how do we appease them? How do we appease them? How do we make peace with them? It was a great, actually it was a great episode because some of the Buffy and or like was like, these spirits are killing us. We don't appease them, we destroy them. And someone else was like, yeah, but we took their land. Like, so you had this debate, right? This great episode
Right.
is around kind of funny. It was that's how Buffy was. It would engage hard concepts in an amusing way,
Hmm.
and it caused you to challenge. And we had discussion anyway. But that's spirits are to be at peace, or spirits are servants of the Lord. Or to be
Yes.
defeated. Wicked spirits are to be defeated. Good spirits are allies.
There, so there was actually recently one of the Grimm episodes, because I'm finishing the whole series. I never got a chance to before, that there's a Native American spirit that rises up and trying to, and again, it was about racism. It was about these nature spirits who were on fighting on behalf of the Native Americans. And for people who don't know, I'm Cherokee, so I was raised in the middle of this. The college I taught at was a Native American Christian college. That was fun, trying to meld those two
Mm-hmm.
totally almost opposing cultural worldviews. And so, yeah, we're spirits supposed to be appeased. We see this a lot, and it's very much portrayed as part of the Native American way of life. And honestly, I don't know many Native Americans who like pray to the spirit of the deer after killing them, or giving thanks for giving their life. I mean, there's a respect, don't get me wrong. I'm not, but I don't see like a ritualized version that we often see portrayed by, let's just be real, white people trying to write about Native Americans.
What
And
about the
so,
dominant culture, like at a university, before a presentation, acknowledging this land? What you see is you almost see a prayer now, where they pray
mm,
to the Native American deity. We acknowledge that we took your land. Was that what it's called? Like acknowledgments. I find that so offensive,
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's like there are ways to acknowledge atrocities,
Hmm. Hmm.
but praying to a Native American spirit Either you're giving it authority and power and acknowledging that these spiritual things are real and can hurt you,
Mhm.
which is pagan,
Right.
or you're trying to somehow bind that thing to support your cause,
I say,
which
yeah,
is
or
witchcraft, also
it's
pagan.
well, and then there's just the dismissal. It's like a superfluous, like we're just going to flip this out there to buy off not necessarily the spirit, but the people, and that's disrespectful too. And so, because let's just be honest, any god that any culture has ever worshipped has power.
Hmm.
People didn't decide to worship another god because it was impotent. I mean, it just that's not how it works. Even the Egyptian magicians were able to replicate the miracles. I keep going back to that because it's such a great um, example of how the
Hmm.
kingdom of darkness does have power. So yeah, and here's the thing. Let's just be real. Every Native American tribal system, they were trying to take land from the other tribes. And this has been an ongoing process. The white colonizers did not do to the Native Americans any more than what they were already doing to each other. And this has been a way of life for all of humanity since the fall of Babel. We've been conquering each other. We've been taking things away from each other. We've been assimilating other cultures into who we are. And now what's really interesting, because in the process of Hollywood trying to say, oh, look, this is horrible, this is terrible, or politicians, we're drawing attention to these old gods, as I will refer to them. We're drawing attention to them in a way that is actually co-opting them and assimilating them further into the white culture.
Oh, that's really good.
So
Yeah, it is. You're right. It is. It is. What do they say? Co-opting them or whatever. It's using them for our political purposes,
yeah,
which is exactly contrary. I mean, oh yeah, that's really good.
it's deceptive and it's disgusting.
Hmm.
And
So
so
here's an example. All right. So pagan view versus biblical view. You tell me which one is which, Emily. Power through ritual or power through relationship and obedience.
easy. So pagan is the ritual. And
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, what we see in so many churches today is we see Christians doing rituals trying to avoid the relationship.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so because we've learned enough about paganism, and I don't know, I think this is kind of ingrained in human beings as a whole. We've learned enough about paganism to realize that rituals do have power. And not
Yeah.
all rituals are bad.
Rituals do have power. I mean, ritual. I'm not talking about. So let me just be clear. I'm not talking about a liturgy.
Right.
All right,
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
like we need rhythm. We need rhythm,
Mhm.
and there are practices. There, I'm not talking about ancient liturgy that provides structure. I am talking about trying to
Baptism,
gain power. Yeah, baptism,
Lord's
lighting
Supper.
candles when you pray. I mean, all sorts of things. All right,
Mhm.
communion, how you practice communion. I am talking about trying to gain power over a deity or a spirit through ritual. Which, by the way, goes back
Right.
to what you were saying when these people tried to co-opt Native American spirits through ritual.
Mhm. Mhm.
Instead of building a relationship with these communities, you know what would be a lot more effective in appeasing harm done and a conquered people? Maybe providing better health care
Right? Oh, don't
and
get
the
me started on
reservations.
tribal healthcare.
Yeah. And you texted me the other day, you were at a clinic there, and that's what brought it to mind. Like maybe that's a better way than, oh, we're going
Right.
to appease to anyway, we're going to acknowledge we
Yeah.
stole land. By the way, your health care is going to remain terrible. Like, I don't know. Those are just, how do you engage people in a compassionate and just way? Well, it's not
Y-
acknowledging what your ancestors did to their ancestors. It's looking at the
y-
poverty now and embrace and like trying to,
Helping someone.
yeah, helping someone
Yes,
through
where they
relationship.
are now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't do me any good to tell me that my great grandparents are in hell because they didn't worship God correctly. I don't know, how that works out. I don't know. well that God's going to do with this. I think if they did have the full truth of the gospel presented to them and they rejected it, there's an issue. If they chose to serve God to the best of their ability, now we have another can of worms. And so that's a big mystery that God's gotten to control. But when you approach a Native American person and you're like, your ancestors are in hell, how do you know? We can go to Romans 1 and talk about natural revelation. And who's more likely to understand natural revelation than these tribal societies who are existing off the land?
Yeah,
So,
for sure. And yes, that is not a helpful conversation. I mean, there is a judgment, and
mhm,
people will be judged according to works. I mean, it says it in Revelation 21, I think, or 22, one of them. And like, I'm just going to defer to God,
mhm,
to the Lord
yep,
Jesus, like because not every, I mean, and um, Luke deals with this in Acts also, whenever they acknowledge how these other religions were supposed to point back to God in a certain way, and people can choose obedience within their context. And
mhm,
because there is no
mhm,
law, the law is written on our hearts. Like, we
right,
do basically know how we're supposed to live. Are you saying
and we
salvation
may
by
not,
works? I'm like, you know what? I'm just going by the scriptures. Okay.
right.
Jesus is Lord. He's going to be judged. Let him deal with it.
We were having this conversation earlier, and I said that because it's not by works, and you like immediately corrected me with, we are supposed to work out our faith with fear and trembling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a verse you hear very often in church.
With
Let's
fear
just,
and trembling. Yeah.
yeah. And so this kind of like goes into what we're talking about too, with like why fear is an important aspect of what we're doing. And I think that's one of the things that's really hurt not only our Christian faith and religion and how it's expressed, but it's also affected our storytelling because we don't engage that fear is a natural part of the human existence. And I mean, good grief, ask any woman who's ever gone into labor.
Mm.
Terrifying, but at the same time, so full of hope and expectation. And so, how much more should the spiritual world have those same components?
Yeah.
And so,
The other day, I
it's
was in the woods and I was texting you because our
yes,
last conversation about, we're talking about nature spirits. I don't see things, but I sometimes pick up on things, and because I was thinking about it, I was thinking about a lot of things. Somebody
mhm,
invited me to go look for Bigfoot, and I was talking to my friend Bear, and I asked his opinion about Bigfoot because years ago I did a paranormal episode, and I was surprised that I was the only one on the panel who didn't really think Bigfoot was real. I was the only one. Like, here I am.
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, and I was like, "Wait, you all think he? Oh yeah." And so I asked my friend Bear about it. He's like, "There are trail cams everywhere." I think we would have a lot trail cams. So not trail cams, but like hunting cams. Like cameras trying to pick up wildlife. And what I was doing in the woods is I was changing batteries, changing out the discs, so we're looking for deer, and also putting a hunting stand up. But anyway, so we'll talk about I speculate about Bigfoot in the Seer book, so we talked about that before. But anyway, my point is, at one point, the wind was blowing in the leaves, and it was sun, and it was sunny, and then all these golden leaves, and I just felt peace. I was already feeling peaceful anyway, and all this, like, I was golden leaves falling all around me, and I'm like, my goodness, this is like a scene in the Lord. This is, I felt like, and I said, oh, I felt welcome here. Then somewhere else in the same woods, this tree was trying to drop an acorn on me, like all around me, but he didn't hit me, and I kind of wondered if he was just teasing, like, so here I am, like, is it real? I don't know. I mean, I just felt like it was less welcoming there.
Mhm,
Maybe the one
mhm.
tree didn't like that we were putting a stand in it. I don't know, but I was just like becoming more aware of my surroundings, more aware of the nature.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that happens when you start to view all of creation as being not part of God, but belonging to God.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, okay, how does he see this? How does he interact with it? And we talked about the verses that, the rocks crying out and nature rejoicing, and maybe we shouldn't read those so metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that, when I go into the woods, kind of like with your experience, those moments, it's like, this is the earth that God created for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in this moment, I'm going to stand here and be in a place that maybe if it's not completely untouched by humanity, it doesn't have the same pollution level. And I'm not talking about like environmental pollutions like chemicals and smog and what have you, but there's not the same pollution level of just other people's presence and the residue that they leave on stuff. And because it's so hard to find language for this, but when you've been in a place and you know this, go to an abandoned shopping mall, go to someplace, a store at 2:00 in the morning, and nobody else is in there, you can still feel the ick from all the other people who've been there.
Yeah.
And so when you get into those locations where that's not there, you really begin to experience, oh, this is a manifestation of my God's power and creative ability. And there is an awe and a sense of peace and harmony that comes with standing in that, just to praise the Creator with the creation. It's amazing.
Do you remember what the area that was a lot creepier in those woods? Remember what I said was close by?
I do. The cemetery.
A cemetery.
Yeah.
And I could not see the cemetery where we were because we were in the woods. But when we were getting back in our vehicles, it was a stone's throw. I mean, I could have thrown a tennis ball or a stone and hit the cemetery. And it was just, talk about, it was just a little bit creepier over there. It was more, not creepy, it was irritable. The woods were irritable there, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because there was a little road there. Maybe it was, I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. But we can bring God's peace there, maybe. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of being a good steward of the earth. It's like, how do we preserve these places? How do we make good use of these places? Because I don't believe all pieces of land are meant to just sit fallow and barren. They're supposed to be part of the creative process. So, but to do so with sensitivity to dogs being sensitive. But yeah, to do it with sensitivity and a hope that, wow, that my dogs would be quiet. That's the hope right now.
Well, that might be the signal, the announcement that it's time to wrap it up. Thank you for listening to the Seers podcast. Opening and closing music is Sun by Jason Callahan. Bumper music includes Just Around the World and Alta Heron by Keela Caps. Music and Seers podcast are distributed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0.